This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest Dr. Allen Mendenhall. Dr. Mendenhall is the Associate Dean of the Jones Law School at Faulkner University. Allen, good to have you on the show.
Steve, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Allen Mendenhall is a very erudite, educated young gentleman. He looks like a law school professor. He fits the part. His folks go so far back over in East Alabama that the Glenn family, who was the founder of Auburn University years ago, Auburn's men's school.
East Alabama Men's College.
East Alabama Men's College is his ancestors. But tell folks about you. You weren't born over in Auburn, were you?
I was not born in Auburn. I was born in Atlanta. My parents and their parents and all my cousins and my sister all went to Auburn. So we spent my childhood going back and forth from Atlanta to Auburn, going to all the football games.
Doesn't take long.
No, it doesn't take long at all. And so Auburn has always been sort of my second home, and in January 2013, I moved to Auburn and made it my full-time home.
Now tell folks about your educational background. You grew up in Atlanta, then went to Furman.
That's right. I went to Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina.
Did you major in English?
I did major in English, and I eventually got my PhD in English from Auburn.
Did you know all the time you were going to probably go to law school?
I did not. There was a time when I was younger where I thought that I would be an English professor, and just sort of through the accidents of life, I ended up going to law school, and I found out a way to do my law degree and my master's in English simultaneously. So I'd go to law school during the day, then at night I would take my master's in English courses, and finished my both degrees that way.
Well, you know, when I was in college and everything, and they would give you tests, and they'd give you counseling, and they'd say, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to law school or whatever like that. They would always steer law school. They'd say then that the best undergraduate degree for law school was English.
Well, there's certainly a lot of writing that goes on, and in the first year curriculum in particular, when students are taking legal writing, having an English background or having a literature background or just having a facility with writing will help you. And of course, lawyers write more than novelists do.
Yeah.
When I was staff attorney up on the Alabama Supreme Court, I would review hundreds of pages of briefs every day, and the ones that stood out for their writing ability.
Had to. I've had numerous law school professors. I'd ask them what makes a difference, and they'd say, you know, all these students know about the same amount of law. It's how they write.
That's right. I think
makes a difference.
That makes a lot of sense. And in a courtroom, how they articulate their position. Some people can be a little too aggressive or a little too passive, but the person who really can go in there and articulate their principles and do so in a way that's just not off-putting has got a leg up on everybody. And in particular in the writing, on the appellate level, you know, if you've got a case before the Court of Civil Appeals or Court of Criminal Appeals or the Alabama Supreme Court or any one of the federal courts, your case is going to be made in those briefs. And so it's important that you craft your argument in a way that's not only convincing, but interesting to read. And sometimes you know that the briefs that are the best, the ones that are the best written are the ones that you don't even really notice that you're reading a brief. You're just sort of flowing through it, and then you get to the end, and there were no hiccups. You never had to stop. You never had to question what an attorney was trying to say. And so in some sense, a good brief can actually be a boring brief. It's just one that doesn't make you think twice.
Allen, so after graduating from Furman with a degree in English, you went and got your master's at West Virginia?
That's correct. I did my master's in English and my law degree simultaneously.
Simultaneously at West Virginia.
And then I did an LLM, which is a master's in law at Temple University in Philadelphia.
Is that why you picked West Virginia? They had a unique challenge where they had I wondered about that. So they had a degree where you could get both your graduate degree in English and law at the same time.
That's right, and it was actually a program that I sort of invented myself. I don't know that anyone else has gone through. There's no formal program for dual MA, JD in English at least. But there were different law schools that I thought about going to, and then different programs in English that I thought about going to. And of the programs where I was in, both the law school and the master's programs, I thought West Virginia was the one that was the best fit for me, and enjoyed my time there, and still have a lot of friends there and keep in touch with some people up there.
That's a beautiful country.
It sure is. It sure is. A lot of snow.
Yeah. Alan, so after that, then you finally made it to Auburn.
I finally made it to Auburn, which was sort of a homecoming for me. It was going back to my roots, and my mom grew up in Opelika. And so I send her pictures all the time. I'm walking around downtown Opelika, and I'll take a picture on my phone.
Where does she live now?
She lives in Atlanta. Both my parents live in Atlanta.
But they both grew up in Lee County?
They sure. Well, my dad grew up in Columbus, Georgia, but my mom grew up in Opelika.
Yeah. And so she likes to see those pictures.
She sure does. I'll take pictures of where she went to school, or stores where she used to shop, and send those to her. And she gets a kick out of it that I'm reliving her past life.
Now, did you come straight here to work for the Supreme Court of Alabama when you are clerk for a judgeship when you first got out of law school?
No, I taught when I first got out of law school. I went straight into teaching, so I taught for a couple of years, then decided I wanted to make some more money, so I went into private practice in Atlanta. And I was a lawyer in Atlanta representing townhomes, condominium associations, developers, real estate agents, property managers. And I got a call one day asking if I would be interested in working for Chief Justice Roy Moore if he were elected to office. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested. And then he was elected, and this was back in 2012 when that phone call happened. And so I came to Alabama in January 2013.
To work with Judge Moore?
To work with him, to work with Chief Justice Moore. And I worked for him for over 3 years. And then I went to the Attorney General's office, and I was Assistant Attorney General in Luther Strange's office. And
what area did you work in over there? What was your specialty?
In the AG's office? I was in opinions. I worked in opinions. And then I went straight from the AG's office over to Jones, and I've been there
in
ever
2016.
Since. That's right.
But you live in Auburn and commute every day.
I do.
And you got a 5- and 2-year-old.
5- and 3-year-old. My son is 5, and my daughter's 3, and it's a really fun time.
Is your wife from Atlanta?
My wife is from Brazil.
Well, how did y'all meet?
We met on Ipanema Beach. So you know the song "The Girl from Ipanema." Yeah. It actually has a personal meaning for me. Yeah, we met on the beach in Ipanema. She was working for a company based out of Atlanta, and of course I was raised in Atlanta. That's where I was from. And someone said, "Hey, Alan, you gotta meet this girl. She's from Atlanta." And I said, oh, "That's interesting that she'd be from Atlanta." And then, of course, she wasn't from Atlanta. She was from Sao Paulo. But we got to talking, and next thing I knew, before I left Rio, we were in Rio. Before we left, I had a plane ticket back to Brazil for the next month. So I just decided, well, when I get back to the States, I know I'm going to have to explain to somebody why I'm going to be going back to Brazil, but I'll just book the ticket and worry about that later. So and here we are. We were married in July 2008.
She likes Alabama, doesn't she?
She sure does. She sure does. And there are a lot of Brazilians around the state and in the Auburn area affiliated with the university, and we have a lot of Brazilian friends, and she gets to speak Portuguese.
Interesting. You and I were talking prior to the show. We have a mutual friend, Keith Watkins, who's a federal judge here.
We sure do.
Terry has got Brazilian roots.
That's right, and it's funny. There are a lot of Brazilian connections. Justice Parker on the Alabama Supreme Court studied at the University of Sao Paulo down in Brazil, and our general counsel over in the Department of Education is a Brazilian. So there are some Brazilian connections around here.
Let's talk about Jones Law School. Give us the history and your involvement over there, how many students. Kind of give us a rundown, because Jones has been a vital, integral part of the Montgomery legal and political community for years and generations, really.
It sure has.
Going back to Professor Jones, tell us the history of him. He was a circuit judge here, wasn't he?
Thomas Good Jones. He was a federal judge. He was a
governor.
Tell us how
the school was founded and where it is now. Take us through the history of it, if you would.
Well, the school came to Faulkner in 1983, and the story I've told is that it was bought from the University of Alabama for $1 when it came to Faulkner. It gained accreditation in 2006 under the leadership of Dean Charles Nelson, who is the current dean. And it's been a thriving law school. Right now is a really tough time for law schools generally. The law school market is rough, and you can see articles all the time about law school crisis. But Jones has weathered the storm pretty well because it was always sort of a smaller school. It didn't have a massive bureaucracy, and it had kept things lean, and so there wasn't a lot of fat that needed to be trimming. So it's doing fairly well compared to a lot of law schools in the current market. But we have 283 students now, and I believe 70-something 1Ls, but 283 students total. And we're looking forward to another great class next year. And as part of what I do at the school is I've actually started a new center there called the Blackstone and Burke Center for Law and Liberty.
That's where Keith is going tonight.
Yeah, that's well, and we're going to be doing a lot of really neat things. So our board of advisors includes such people as Judge Andrew Napolitano from Fox News, Robert P. George, a professor at Princeton, Jim Stoner at LSU, Daniel Mark, who is on the U.S. Commission for International Religious Liberty. He's a professor at Villanova. Dr. Ingrid Gregg, who was the president and CEO of the Earhart Foundation. Frank Buckley, who's a professor at George Mason University. And I'm going to start missing some names here, so I don't mean to cause offense to the people I've left off, but we have a few more on the advisory board. So it's a big national project, and we're going to look at natural law, natural rights, religious liberty, economic freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of associations, all these ancient liberties that are preserved and re-articulated throughout the common law tradition. And it's an exciting project.
Allen, when Jones was first begun, it was a night law school.
That's right.
Of your 283 students, are they full-time students now, or do you still have part-time students?
They are. We do not have the part-time program or
It's gone.
or the evening program. It is gone now. That's correct.
So your students are full-time?
They are full-time.
Where all do they, how many undergraduate schools are represented? Do you know a ballpark?
I don't have the exact figure. I know that the vast majority come from the state of Alabama.
They do?
They do.
Would most of them be Alabama, Auburn, and Troy graduates and that sort of thing?
I believe our biggest feeder school is Auburn University, but I think followed by Troy, and then a lot from Alabama as well. So most in-state, and one primary reason for that is gaining accreditation in 2006, which means for only roughly 11 years, have graduates at the school been able to practice law outside, go take bar exam outside
Prior
of Alabama.
to that, you were limited to Alabama.
That's right. So just
right.
sort of following the networks of graduates, it's just sort of natural that a lot would either gravitate to the state and stay, or they would be in-state going to Jones.
Well, Allen, let me ask you a question. What percent do you think out of your 283 or 300 are out of state? Is half, you think?
No, I don't think even half. I would say I should have a figure for you.
It's
but
still mostly Alabama school, though.
It sure is. It sure is.
And Auburn is the biggest feeder school, and Troy be second?
That's right. And we have about 30% of our student body comes from racial diversity. And
which is about like the state population.
That's right. But one thing that makes us unique, though, is that 10% of the students who enroll in our school are doing so to start law as a second career. So they have been either, maybe they were in the Air Force over at Maxwell, or maybe they were in government work, and they just decided, oh, well, I'm doing stuff that involves the law, and I have a little bit of legal experience. I ought to go to law school. And so we have a lot of students that do that. In fact, when I was teaching a class in the law school in 2013, I had a pilot in the class, and he flew commercial air and then retired early and decided, well, I'm going to do something with the second half of my career, and may as well be law.
Yeah. What all do you teach now out there?
Well, right now I'm teaching a course actually outside of the law school. I'm teaching a course in the humanities department, and it is Western Cultural Heritage, which is from the Enlightenment to the present. So if you can imagine teaching a class that broad, it's taught on a great books approach. So we started off reading Immanuel Kant, what is the Enlightenment, and then reading Hobbes and Locke and their different views of the state of nature, and then going into the Scottish Enlightenment and reading Adam Smith and David Hume, and then gradually moving into Romanticism, and before that we'll touch on the French Revolution, and so it's a sweeping course, but a really fun course to teach. It's interesting to see students who haven't encountered some of these big formative ideas of Western civilization coming at them for the first time, and they get really interested, and there's some lively discussion, and it's always fun to see eyes sort of opening in class.
How many full-time professors do y'all have now?
We only have 12 full-time professors in the law school. So
have they been teaching the same courses a long time?
Some have and some haven't.
Who are some of the professors out there?
Oh, Professor Adam McLeod, Dean Ron McFarland, Dean Charles Nelson, Professor Mike DeBoer, Professor Andy Ulrey, Professor Lane Keel.
Who teaches contracts and torts?
Well, we have a couple people teaching both of those classes. So one was Professor Mike DeBoer, another is Professor Lane Keel. So with 12 people, we have to cover all those core classes. So contracts, torts, property,
criminal law.
Contracts, criminal law, constitutional law, all those get covered in the first and second years. Now, what makes our curriculum unique, and to my knowledge, no other law school in the United States does this, is we have a Foundations of Law course that's required for all of our 1Ls. And what that consists of is readings from Aristotle all the way up to the present in jurisprudence. So students will learn about what the sources of law are, and they'll ask questions about, is law antecedent to human promulgation, or is it rooted in nature or the divine? And they'll explore different thinkers throughout the Western tradition and how these questions were asked, and that will give them a sense of the history of the profession into which they're about to enter. So it's an ancient profession. And there are a lot of philosophers that have looked at law in a lot of different ways, and it's important to sort of learn the trajectory of law down through the centuries so you know your own context, so you know your own place. The 20th century saw a dramatic shift in the way people thought about law, and it's important to know that we are just coming out of that century, and to know that there were different ways of looking at the law just in the 19th century and then in the 18th century. And so maybe there will be different ways of looking at the law in the coming century, but it's always, in my view, important to have a sense of context. I think it's humbling to remember that you are just part of one little dot on that timeline.
Allen, you're also an author.
I am.
Tell
yes.
our viewers about your book. You brought your book with you.
I did.
And it has to do with not just law, does it? Or is it, you've got the greatest legal mind and one of the most famous justices, Oliver Wendell Holmes' Pragmatism and the Jurisprudence of Agon.
Of Agon, that's right, yeah.
Explain that to us.
Okay, well, Agon is this Greek concept for an athletic competition. And
let's show our viewers the book, if we can. Can you get up close, Ronnie? They can get this online, can't they? Of course,
I'm sure.
Mostly law students will be interested in this, I guess, mostly.
Yeah, what I try to do is I try to bring my literary background to bear on legal analysis. And I examine Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., who was a Supreme Court Justice from 1902 to 1932. Before that, he was Chief Justice on the highest court in Massachusetts. And I look at his opinions for their literary quality.
He's considered one of the greatest Supreme Court justices ever, isn't he? Oliver Wendell Holmes.
He is. He's one of the landmark justices, and he's a controversial figure. It's actually hard to find people that just really like Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr.
Was he had a bad disposition or something, or just?
Well, no. He's actually, his disposition, I think people tended to like him in person. He had sort of a lively personality and enjoyed dinner parties and cracking jokes and having fun. But I think his views of the law are controversial. So he attacked the view of natural law. So anybody that's a proponent of natural law theory is going to be in opposition to Holmes.
When you say natural law, what does that mean?
Natural law is the idea that law precedes any human promulgation, so that the law is pre-political. It's something that exists and is universal and eternal, and either rooted in human nature, or if you're religious, you believe that it's rooted in some sort of divine law, but that the laws that are enacted by human beings ought to conform with that natural law. So Holmes rejected that view, and he had this theory that he called the bad man theory of the law. And he said, well, let me tell you what the law is. All the law is whatever the judge says it is. So if you want to know what the law is, according to Holmes, you put yourself in the position of the bad man. Well, what does the bad man do? He thinks, well, I'm going to do whatever I can do and still get away with without getting thrown in jail. So whatever that is that I can get away with, that's the limits of the law. And so according to Holmes, the law is essentially that. It's rooted in human institutions, human custom, human tradition. It's passed on, it's modified, it's adapted according to different circumstances and technological innovations over time. And in that sense, it is an evolutionary product of human interaction and human behavior, and not something that has this transcendent essence.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Now, tell us what prompted you to write this, because that's one of the basic theories of law is you wanted to talk about how Oliver Wendell Holmes...
Well, specifically, I wanted to look at his dissents.
Uh-huh.
And so a Supreme Court justice will author different kinds of opinions. You can write a concurrence, you can write the lead opinion in a case, you can write a dissent. Now, a dissenting opinion expresses the reasons why you disagree with the majority or plurality opinion. Mm-hmm. And my argument, part of my argument, is that if you are Holmes, his writings are not particularly impressive for their reasoning. He doesn't analyze cases in a really sound way all the time, but he writes with a lot of flair. His opinions are full of aphorism and metaphor and all kinds of literary devices. He's got rhythm, and they're musical, and he always talked about how he thought Shakespeare and Dante and some of these major writers survived in the literary canon because of the way they sounded. And in his opinions, he tries to write in a way that sounds interesting. So when law students come to a case, Lochner v. New York is an example. It's a big major case. Everyone's going to read Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s dissent in that case. Well, the reason they read it, the reason that it survives, is because it was so different. It was so interesting and unique that it actually has literary qualities. It's actually not just a judicial opinion, but a literary document. And notwithstanding his lack of case citations or sort of fly by the seat of his pants reasoning, that dissent is going to be discussed in law school classrooms. People are going to read it. People are going to continue to cite to it because of the way it sounds. Mm-hmm.
Alan, I'll tell you one thing. We're lucky in Montgomery to have the Jones Law School.
I agree.
A lot of lawyers here in Montgomery. And I'm told that some of the bigger law firms specialize in hiring Jones graduates. Most of Jerry Beasley's law firm.
Yeah, we have some graduates at Beasley Allen. Uh-huh. We have 2 Supreme Court justices, 14 circuit court judges.
Who are the Supreme Court justices now?
Justice Tommy Bryan and Justice Kelly Wise.
Both of those are Jones.
They sure are.
Tommy and Kelly.
They sure are.
Both of them been on my show.
I saw their picture out in the hallway before I walked in here.
Good. Tommy's taller than you think he is.
Oh, he's really tall. And for a while there on the Supreme Court, because I was working there when he was there, he had 2 really tall staff attorneys, and you saw these just three guys on stilts walking down the hallway. It was always kind of funny.
That. So Tommy and Kelly, your 2 Supreme Court justices.
That's correct.
Who else are on the bench? So who on the Court of Appeals? Or anybody on the Court of
Well,
Appeals?
yes, we got Judge Mary Wyndham, and we've got a lot of judges. So it would be hard to name them all. I think I was going to say we had 20 district court judges, 14 circuit court
in the state. Mm-hmm.
In the state, 10 DAs, 10 district attorneys, 3 probate judges. So it's hard to keep track of names just right offhand, but there are a lot of them, and they represent people in all levels of government. They're Jones graduates in in all three branches of government.
Well, a lot of folks in business have Jones Law School.
They sure do.
You know, a lot of bankers do.
They sure do.
Have gone to Jones Law School over the years.
And there are students that come not to just practice law, but because they want to excel in business, and a law degree is an important credential to have for that, and the skills you get in law school are transferable, and you can use them in the business world. So we have people that come to our school who just want to advance their career in the business world, and they don't necessarily want to hang up a shingle and practice law.
The curriculum is the same either way, though.
That's correct.
There's no joint MBA program or anything like that, is there now?
There currently is not, although we've talked about developing one.
Cumberland had one at one time. I don't know if Cumberland even has that anymore.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, y'all are recruiting people for the Jones Law School next year. Y'all,
we sure
what's
are.
the LSAT average this year?
Well, I don't think we've got a set average yet. You know, we're still having numbers come in, and we're just now extending acceptance letters to people, and so I don't think we have any kind of final numbers yet. But I will say our application rates are actually up significantly from last year, which is very unusual in this time for law schools. We're one of the few schools that I know of that can actually boast of an increase in applications since last year, which is important.
Well, Alan, our time is up. I hate to tell you, but we've had a good time.
I've had a great time. I sure have. Thank you for having me on.
We'll do it again sometime soon, because Jones Law School is such an integral part of Montgomery, Alabama, and the river region. Has been for generations of lawyers, judges, beginning with Judge Thomas Good Jones years ago. Our guest tonight has been the Associate Dean of Jones Law School at Faulkner University, Dr. Allen Mendenhall. And we thank you, viewers, for watching Alabama Politics, and hope you tune in again next week. Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Mendenhall.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.